I'm gonna hand on the next session to our colleague from MASA, Dr. Kweli Sugiana. She's a member of the MASA, but she's gonna talk to us about her work before and after joining us, about her fieldwork data and working on the field in India and analyzing this data for her work and research.
Thank you, Azadi. Yes, so I'm working for MASA project and I'm taking care of the India training and field work. So today, until now, the way Azadi presented about how the archaeological data population is a challenge, I'm slightly moving to the next step of the attribute data. I'll be focusing on how one can go about gathering the attribute data. Here, when I say data and attribute data, the archaeological site as a point or as a polygon, that's one form of data. That data can be attached with various information, like probably its geology or its physiographic features, its site area, at what elevation it is. Many such attributes can be added to that particular one data. So that's what I'm going to be talking about and discuss with you how I go about populating this data. But I'm going to be doing this at two levels. One, I would enter into the site level data. Once you're on site, how does one go about collecting these data? And then at a landscape level. So this stems out from the thought that when some of the PhD scholars or students reach out to me asking, where do I find this map? How do I convert this data? Where do I find this data related to my site? So this is where the whole thought process starts. So starting with, I would enter this presentation through MASA itself. So there's a workflow which MASA follows where we first get all the historical maps and then use legacy data and bring the data on the known and undocumented archaeological sites together, right? That's our first methodology. And how we do about is, like, if you can relate, the historical maps are georeferenced, and then we manually or through machine learning algorithm, we kind of try and find the mound site. So now the data, finding archaeological data is one form of data. And like I've experienced this sitting back in India. Having a list of sites is not a problem once you're the sites are in your backdrop, in your backyard, right? So now you have your data. So then what we do is, so here we have either some way we have the mound detected, and then we obviously, once we have an idea, we go on field and we validate it. Even that, we have a method where we kind of use a hexagon grid sampling method, and then we go on field and we have a systematic transect survey wherever feasible, and we carry out. So now MASA open database, we move all the information to this. So now the data is there either in such databases or even in any of your thesis from your seniors. You're sitting in your backyard, you know where the sites are being an archaeologist. So you have the data. This is now moving on to what one can do further when you're on field. So once we have the location of the potential archaeological mound, which we have identified either from historical maps or through manual or machine learning method, we are going for field validation. So during field validation, one of our primary tasks is to understand the extent of the site. So this is one of the attribute that I'm talking to you about. Here, when I say the extent of the site is also one attribute, which gives an understanding of, say, maybe in this case, the size of the past habitation, maybe. That's one of the clues it gives, right? When you actually go and record the extent. How do you go about doing it? So if you see here, this map, 1930, you just see one large mound, which is 25 R. This is a 1930 map, so it is 25 R is 25 feet. And then I kind of bring in various time period data. So Corona 1960 kind of shows me the extent of the map. Now I'm confident, okay, that's the extent. Why is the extent of the site here crucial? Because currently, with the rapid urban, even rural, and infrastructure expansion that's happening in this part of the world is quite high. And it's like one field season, you would have seen an archaeological site. You come back, you go for the next field season, you may not find that site. So this is one nice sequence which I generally put up in my presentation to show how slowly the mound is reducing in size. In 2023 Google Earth image, this is all is the image that you actually see. So this is one interesting site where from the map we have temporal images over the period since like literally it's going to be 100 years, and this is the state at which the site is presently, and it turned out to be a archaeological site. So this is kind of like remotely doing through the maps, through the satellite data. You do the extent of your study area. You can just visually see and collect your site extent. Number two, moving on, once you're on field. So I'm going to talk about how I do the next level of analysis. Here, this is the extent of the site. Like before going, we do see this. So this 105 and 106 are given to us as a site location. An archaeologist, when they went there, they had seen this, and they had reported the site. And when we came to know about that site, we thought, why not do a systematic survey and see how we can analyze that site extent. So they had reported two sites. Since it was close to each other, we regarded, like before going, we kind of looked at into the Google Earth image, and we kind of said, okay, fine, this is the extent of the site that we are going to be surveying. So we do plan for a systematic parallel transect survey. So this is another kind of information that I'm bringing in. GIS not only helps in post or like bringing the data, it even helps in field planning, the transect planning. So then, and we go on site and we start at point one and we kind of systematically follow. And the field conditions are kind of sometimes very different. You might see something on the Google Earth map, but when we are on field, we start seeing different things. So we started at one, and then we kind of went from west to east, and then we started doing the survey, and we stopped the survey when we stopped seeing more artifacts. So these red dots that you see on the screen are all the locations where we have recorded, where we saw these three things. One, the artifacts, what is the type of artifacts, the density of artifacts, and the cultural period. So once we do this kind of planning and we go, we plot this. And what is just here, I've only given you the dots, the red dots clearly shows you the extent to which I have been able to survey, right? But now these three, the transect, every transect unit has these three information. So slowly I will make it complex. You see here, so this is the kind of site. Here there is no mound, it's a flat ground, and we are told it's a Harappan site. So we go there, and once we start recording systematically as a transect survey, and then we plot. See, if you see here, there are two types of plots here. One, the blue shade one, which shows the density of artifacts. So as we are kind of putting up the density map, which is a heat map, basically. It's a very simple one quick step. So we start seeing that the density of artifacts were more to the south of this entire surveyed area. And it was gradually reducing as we were going towards the north, where both the streams meet. And we never found any artifacts in this patch beyond the point 10 and 5, right? And once you put them on just a simple QGIS map, like you just bring it into the database, change some colors and symbology, it starts speaking to you. So we start seeing here that where there is more density, we see that if you, the brown dots here, if you check with my map, you see that the mature Harappan pottery is more denser on this side. And as you go towards the west, you see the mix of medieval and mature Harappan. But as you go towards the north, you start seeing only the medieval representation. And beyond 10 and 5, there are not much of representation. This is one quick study which kind of, once you're done with your field work, we just plot and visualize. It doesn't take much of a time. So this is another attribute that I can add value to my site level study. So moving on, imagine similarly, if there are about, you keep building up data for each one of the sites. So this is what backend MASA project is about. So currently, like I just went yesterday and checked, and we found over 4,000 archaeological sites already moved on to the database. So we have the database. Now we need the other attribute, like we are going from one site level to larger scale. So just to give a clarity here, you see that every archaeological site we can kind of provide many attributes to it. Here are a few attributes that I've shared with you. You might, depending on your research question, you might have more attributes that you want to attach to your archaeological site. In general, generally, like there will be, you can see that the stream-based, the hydrology-based database, the cultural period and artifacts, what's the shape and form of the site, which district does it belong? All these are little clusters, right? So say, for example, why is the screen not moving? Okay, let's assume you have the left part of the data, somebody is given to you and you have it. But if the question arises like, where do I find, Quilly, where do I find the hydrology, soil, geology, and those kind of things? This, the right-hand side of the screen. Let's see how to go about. So now I move on from MASA project and move on to this small little semi-arid river valley, which I have worked in for some time here, where it's very well known for the Patadakal group of monuments, one of the World Heritage sites. So just to give you a background to where I'm talking about, it's a World Heritage site, and I have this. We know that there are a couple of 5 very well-known sites here. So this is the area where all that I've just done is I've just gone and populated following the same historical, using the historical map and field survey. I've populated some data for this site. So in this case, I've plotted only the historical settlements in that valley. I also have a list of archaeological and built heritage sites. So here I'm going to talk about the historical settlements. So I've just plotted this. So the background image that you see is called a DEM, and I've generated the stream, the rivers, and I've also delineated the hills in it separately. So this is simple for visualization. So just with this data, I'm able to, once I delineate, I'm able to say that, okay, my valley area is this many square kilometer, my hill area is to the total area, how much percentage of my study area has hill area, how many settlements I have, and I can, with the number of settlements in the area, I can get the settlement density. How often does my settlements occur in the study area? So this is basically just putting the data. I have not done anything more in this. The next is the geology map. So, so this is the DEM part of it, which you can download as SRTM or Cartosat DEM for Indian subcontinent, which you can download from Bowen. So similarly, if some of you are asking like, what geology are all these 89 settlements sitting in? So this is something very simple. You can just go to Geological Survey of India, which is called Bhukosh. You can just request for a download, and then they give you a shapefile. So now you have a shapefile which is geo-coordinated, which is a digital, it's a digital file, GIS file. You can just put that in the background, put your data over it, points over it, and then you have your data, and then you just have to coordinate the points with the background information, and you can just see that just by populating and doing some quick calculations, you know that you can get the area and the geological distribution and the density, how often are they occurring, where are the sites occurring, and how many sites are there in each one of the geographical formation. So this is also very simple, and you can just download it, right? So this is the DEM I spoke to you about some time back. Just with one DEM, you can generate like multiple, like 5-6 variety of data. One such data is the slope map. So here I just have this one DEM and I can generate a slope map, orientation map, and I can also generate a stream density map. The stream map, I can kind of, this is all the data that I can just generate with one database and my sites in place. So I can talk about how many lengths of streams are there, how dense are the streams. I can talk about how many orders of streams are there just with one DEM and how frequently does the streams occur. So, you know, based on that, I can say that my site area, my study area is how well drained. And I can look into this, I can relate to the sites to the slope, and I can count the number of sites in which slope and start correlating, right? So like this, I've done for slope. I know in what slope most of my sites are, which I've highlighted. Similarly, I can also say all my sites prefer which direction of the slope. Most of my settlements were in the southern slopes. Similarly, I can move on to say in what density, like I see that most of my sites prefer to be within 200 to 300 meters from the stream. And I see that most of my the stream density there in which my sites are sitting is in between where there is 1,500 to 2,000, sorry, 35 percentage of stream density, in which stream density. So then now I know that I can start correlating the stream to the soil. So I mean, like similarly, I can do for the soil and geology also, right? So now moving on. Now see here we have a digital data. Somebody gave me a shape file of the geology I had. Now somebody gave me a digital DEM, digital elevation model. I have it and I can do it. Somebody in the sense I can download it. But what if there is no data? This is again similar, like I just have a soil map, which is as an image. So what I have done in this case is I've georeferenced the soil map for the study area. I have overlapped my sites over the study area and I've created the map like this. So this is another form of integrating the attribute data. Even if you don't have a shapefile, you can generate your own shapefile because if you have a paper map available for that study area. And I've correlated and I've seen that, okay, most of my sites are falling within red gravelly clay soil, and then I go and analyze what does that mean to me and how much of area is it covering, like whatever, depending on your research question, you can start questioning your data. So this is the summary of the outcome of what kind of I've tried doing, right? So does it end there? So until now, I was talking about a very statistical method, which is point based. Every point is attached with the data. I can also do something like this. What I've done here is I've traced the old historical networks from the old 1880 map and superimposed them over my DEM, and I've seen it over my settlement data. And I kind of start seeing that how all the networks are going across, most of the settlements are going across the hills. So these kind of observations can be quickly made with this kind of data pattern. So especially with this study area, the Malaprabha, where on the left you see all the well-known monuments, and once I start recording and I put in all my study, all the findings, like all the points of all the archaeological and built heritage and the settlement sites, along with the older network, it starts looking more and more complex. Yeah. So this is the kind of flow chart. So descriptive data here, the spatial data, the old maps, corona image, and printed thematic maps. So these are some of the non-downloadable digital spatial database, which are it's in very like under developing. Many of them are more interactive. You can visualize and you can make your thought, you can put on the filters and see. So that is Bhuvan Kasturi, which is going to be released soon, MASA 1 and the Ecos Atlas for the Southern India. And then other one, which I spoke to you about, the remote sensing, the DEM, which you can process and create. So all of this kind of a complex workflow comes together, and I can either do a geospatial visualization or a statistical analysis, and I have my results. So this is kind of like what I've tried doing in this entire presentation from a site level, you go on to a understanding and analysis. And then I've also tried discussing with you when many sites come together, how one can go and look for data. Yes. Thank you with that. Can I?
Thanks very much, Quilly, for this great talk. I think
Was I on time?
very much so. Yes, and we have time for questions. And it was a great work of showing kind of the process with different source of data. What are the steps? What are the things that you can do, and why, for what results, and kind of a timeline in each kind of how much of your time is spent basically on those. So if there are any questions, you can raise your hands, and then I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself and ask your questions to Queely. There is one question in the chat about whether you use QGIS or ArcGIS. And that,
only QGIS.
yes, we're
I
we're
mean,
the.
yes,
Go ahead, Willy.
I'm sorry to just jump in and say it with so much joy that I've used only QGIS and not much of ArcGIS. QGIS helps with all these basic analysis.
That's very nice to hear, because one of our push is to use open source softwares, and we all like QGIS because it's open source, and you're saying that it does everything that you want it to do. So
Yes. And just to add, it's not only the GIS software which is open source, all the data that I've used for this particular study, which I've shared with you both for, I mean, MASA is truly open source. But even for my thesis study area, which the Malaprabha River Valley, all the data that I've used are from open source. None of them were bought or anything. It's you just go looking for them and you take them.
thanks, Willy. There is, Ankitesh, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Am I audible?
Yes, you are. Go ahead, please.
Thank you for this insightful presentation. Actually, I wanted to ask, how does the integration of temporal data, like in 4D GIS modeling, enhance the predictive conservation of heritage sites compared to traditional static spatial mapping?
You can do draping of the older temporal data if you want to visualize the four-dimensional work. For visualizing, I know of some work which is done for some forts in south of India, but I've not done them myself. But yeah, I mean, I am not very sure how it can be used for conservation. I'm not sure. Maybe you can create a model which says this is how the site would have been there. That's all I can answer for.
Okay, ma'am. I was just curious if we can create some data set using 4D GIS.
So maybe we can get, because I think
yeah.
I haven't used it for the
Yeah, even I haven't used
if there is
it,
anyone
so.
in the community and they would like to answer and Kitesh question, go ahead. I'm gonna ask Vagar has his hand up patiently. Vagar, could you unmute yourself and ask your question, please?
Yeah, perfect. Very well done, Quayle. Good to
Thank
see
you.
you after so long. So I have a couple of questions regarding the field. As I'm like done 3 seasons of field in Cholistan. The one site you mentioned in your presentation about the Harappan and mature Harappan, and it integrates in the center and it overlaps. The circular where the potsherds are scattered, you have created the blue bubble. Is it predictive, or is it it comes through the ODK?
That
That's
comes
the
from
first.
the field survey, yes, very much from the field survey. I'm not used to, I don't know how to do predictive modeling. I'm not so advanced in QGIS, simply put. It's just from the
No,
field. What pottery I've
yeah, I
collected.
understand the Yeah, I understand the one which for the cross transact we take these points, but you have created that blue bubble around it, and it shows the scatter of the pottery on the mount. So that one which I was hoping to get answer on.
That's basically a heat map, Vakar. That's basically a
All right,
heat map. So that's
perfect.
how beautiful the ODK is designed, the survey questionnaire. So you can come back and you just plot it and you can immediately see. It's basically a heat map. It's just one command in QGIS.
And one other thing you mentioned about the soil composition around the sites. And when you're working on a similar area for quite some time, then you understand the soil texture and it founds
Yes.
around the riverine, the dried riverine. And this season and the previous season's field survey, we are working on in a very secluded enclosure, which is away from the human intervention for almost 9 years, and they are perfectly intact without any disturbance, vandalism, or illegal digging. So the riverine shows the pottery scattered, the small fragments of pottery around it. The soil texture, which you were mentioning, how it because there are a couple of sites which are nearby and it runs through this river line. So is there any way to distinguish then the pottery differences of these different sites, or does it collide and integrate overlap on these same sites? I hope it makes sense
Soil.
to you.
Soil differs from the archaeological site, and once you go away from the site, like, so what are the map that I was talking to you about is more of a soil sciences map, that is. So I was just trying to see in that and what kind of soil typology people prefer to generally settle down. So that was the scale at which I was studying. But if you come to the site level study, I can say from my experience on the field that soil quality changes on archaeological site. And as you go away, the texture changes and things like that. So that's a field
Yes,
level observation that one can do.
perfect. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much, Quilly.